Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in about a minute. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. There might be some other people who are joining us later, but we will go ahead and start jumping right in. This is our second webinar in our Colorado Safe Routes to School series. We're talking about safe routes to school in times of uncertainty, keeping your programs running and your community active during COVID-19 and beyond. We got a lot of feedback from people that this is an area where you want some more support, so we hope that you'll be able to learn some new resources today as we all kind of navigate what is happening together and support one another. And I will be joined today. It'll be me, Michelle Lieberman, who was on our last call, and Natasha Run, who's also from Safe Routes Partnership. And I will introduce them in a moment. So before we get started, again, just a quick review of Safe Routes Partnership and who we are. Our mission is to advance safe walking and rolling to and from schools and everyday life, improving the health and well-being of people of all races, income levels, and abilities, and building healthy, thriving communities for everyone. And our vision is that we know our bodies were designed to move, yet many of our communities were created with intentional inequities that limit mobility. We believe change is necessary to achieve a vision of safe, active, equitable, and healthy communities, urban, suburban, and rural, for everyone. So as I mentioned, today's speakers, again, I'm Corey Johnson. I'm the Program Support Manager here at Safe Routes Partnership. I'm also joined by Michelle Lieberman, who's our Consulting and Program Support Director, and Natasha Run, who is our Healthy Parks and Places Manager. A few housekeeping items before we get started. To the left is the GoToWebinar viewer through which you can see the presentation. Your control panel will collapse when not in use, but to keep it open, you can click View menu and uncheck the Auto Hide control panel. There are two options listening to us today, telephone or mic and speakers on your computer. If you have sound problems with one selection, try the other option, and we will do our best to field any issues if you just send us a message in the chat box. Also, even though you're muted, we want to hear from you. We want your input. So please use the questions box to ask speakers questions for the Q&A portion of the webinar, which will take place after all the speakers have presented. We'll try to answer your questions if there's time at the end. Also, today's webinar will be recorded and available online, and we'll provide a link in a follow-up email so you can refer back to it or share it with colleagues who weren't able to attend today. We're also going to share out links to the different resources that we're talking about today, so don't worry about rushing to take notes or getting everything jotted down. We will make sure that you have everything that you need, and if you have other questions about resources, please feel free to ask us or follow up with us after the webinar. And for today's agenda, so we're going to start with just an overview of Safe Routes to School and COVID-19, what we're doing at the partnership, what other people are doing in different communities. We'll talk about keeping your programs up and running during COVID-19, planning for when campus activities resume, possibly in the fall, planning beyond COVID-19, and then some Q&A and next steps. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michelle to get us started.
Great, thanks, Corey. I'll start by saying that the overarching theme with COVID-19 is that there's a lot of uncertainty in every aspect of our daily lives right now, and things are really changing on a weekly and sometimes daily basis. So we had originally planned for this webinar to be focused on safe routes to school policy And probably about a month ago, it became clear to us and to CDOT that we couldn't expect people to listen into a webinar on that topic right now. And, really those of us working on Safe Routes to School, an initiative that is focused on traveling to and from school campuses, has been, we've really had our world shifted dramatically as students have been told to stay home and do distance learning. But we've seen Safe Routes to School practitioners, schools, families, and community champions show up and ask what happens to Safe Routes to School and what can we do. And all this is happening on top of, the challenges that the pandemic has brought to each individual's personal life.
You lost Michelle for a moment. We're trying to get her audio back on. Hang tight.
Corey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm not sure where I left off. But our organization has really seen a number of Safe Routes to School programs, walking and biking advocacy groups, health coalitions, and others be really bold and try strategies out in communities around the country over the past few weeks. So today we're going to share ideas for what we think are promising strategies to continue the good Safe Routes to School work during these challenging times and plan for the future. I'm going to kick us off by talking a little bit about what we're doing at the Safe Routes Partnership, some things that are happening in Colorado, and generally what we're seeing Safe Routes to School practitioners around the country do. At the Safe Routes Partnership, we've put out a series of blog posts sharing ideas for continuing Safe Routes to School work, supporting walking and biking during the pandemic, how walking and biking advocates can support other related issues that intersect our space, and doing equitable community engagement during these times of distancing. These blog posts are all up on our website, saferoutespartnership.org, and we'll be continuing to add to these over time. We've also seen a lot of activity on our Safe Routes to School listserv or Google group, where practitioners around the country are asking questions of each other and sharing their ideas and examples. There's also a Safe Routes to School COVID-19 resources Google Sheet, where we've been organizing ideas into categories as they come in. We'll send out links to both of these resources so that you have them. And finally, we're really learning from you all working on the ground. Those of you working directly in communities, we want to serve as a clearinghouse and a facilitator of conversations, but we're really trying to learn from your experiences on the ground. So I'm guessing that you've been inundated with emails with local and state resources. Here are just a few to highlight in case you're not aware of them that we wanted to bring up kind of related to our space. First of all, CDOT is doing daily updates with information and resource links. The Department of Education has a number of resources, including healthy habit tips for families. The Department of Health Equity has tools to stop the spread of racism during COVID-19, including an inclusive virtual community engagement guide. And the Department of Public Health and Environment has been releasing race and ethnicity data as based on reported cases. If you are a current Safe Routes to School grantee and you have concerns or would like to talk about the specifics of your current grant, you can reach out to Melissa at CDOT. Her contact information is here to go ahead and talk a bit about your specific situation. And then finally, what are we seeing Safe Routes to School practitioners around the country do? We're seeing them share resources on bicycle and pedestrian safety, resources encouraging physical activity for students and families while they're at home. We're seeing them do professional development and try to advance their own work at the time. We see a lot of them connecting with other Safe Routes School coordinators and also taking the time to plan for the future. So we'll spend the rest of the webinar talking about what we're seeing Safe Routes School folks do and what you might want to think about doing. We're going to break this down into planning for immediate activities, short-term and long-term. So in the immediate horizon, everybody was probably already thinking about National Bike to School Day, which was supposed to happen on May 6th. And the National Center for Safe Routes to School has put out the statement. Bike to School Day has been
I think we lost Michelle again, but I can pick up on talking about Bike to School Day. So the National Center for Safe Routes to School has decided, now since school is closed a lot of places, that that we can do Bike to School Day from a distance. So they put out this this note just saying that we can't gather together this Bike to School Day. We can still find time to focus on safety, fun, and and community connection. So, so they're offering a week of ideas from May 4th to May 8th to help people still keep the spirit of Bike to School Day alive, even though we are not necessarily all gathering together. So here's a list of a few different activities that we plan for Bike to School Day from May 4th to May 8th. It includes decorating your sidewalks or windows to encourage people to bike or walk in your neighborhood. The popular teddy bear hunt is one of their suggestions. Tuesday, conducting a bike safety and helmet fit check. Wednesday, going out for a ride or a walk with your family. Thursday, sharing different safety concerns about walking or biking, and then Friday, holding a 5-minute interview with family members about their experience of walking or biking. So again, these are just some suggestions about keeping Bike to School Day alive, even though we're not actually going to school right now. And again, we will make sure that we share all this information with you at the end, so you can then share with your communities and your students and their families. And I'm now going to pass it over to Natasha Run, who's going to discuss how we can stay active while we are physically distancing.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I used to actually live in Colorado Springs, and so Colorado has a very special place in my heart. My name is Natasha Run, and I manage the Safe Routes to Parks program here at Safe Routes Partnership. In that program, we work on activating local parks and green spaces and making access to them safe and equitable for everyone. I am going to share a little bit about the guidelines we're seeing for outdoor physical activity during this time so that we can share that with people and keep them safe and healthy. And then I'll also share some fun ideas to get people outside, physically active, and also engage with Safe Routes to School. So I think the important thing to remember here is that guidelines for what to do and what not to do are all very context specific. So I'm really just speaking to the context of the state of Colorado and CDC guidelines. Your city or county may have further guidelines, so please do look into those and follow them. Your social distancing and stay-at-home orders at the state level don't mean that you have to stay inside and never leave your house, which is great. Going outdoors is allowed and even encouraged. Getting outside is a great way to keep people physically and mentally healthy during this stressful time, and also a great way to channel the energy of kids and parents who have been cooped up together in the house. Above all, the basic guidelines for your state and the CDC are just kind of outlined up on the slide. And I think if we stick with those, then we can still do a lot of really fun things. But make sure to check with your local guidelines. So if you have noticed less traffic in your neighborhood, which I certainly have, you're not alone. There's a lot of advocates across the country who have been seeing that. And I don't know if you've all been tapped into active transportation news, but there has been a big push for open streets, closing down streets to cars during this time. Whether or not the streets are officially closed down, I think that extra space and the need to physically distance from others means that we have an opportunity to use more of our street space for active transportation and fun. Consider encouraging people to practice their route to school as a physical activity break that also prepares kids for when they do get to go back to school. As advocates, we can take this opportunity to share safe riding skills and disseminate that information to help parents teach those skills. So talking about how to safely fit the helmet, how to safely use signals. We can also talk about how to do all of this with social distancing. And then now for one of my favorite pieces, getting creative together. Just because we can't directly interact with people in our neighborhoods doesn't mean that we can't do things that connect us to one another. For example, there are tons of things that we can do with just a box of chalk and to get people physically active, involve kids, and share some joy with our neighbors. So one idea that I really loved is that we've been seeing these kind of pop-up physical activity courses recently. This is actually a picture from my neighborhood in Washington, D.C., and I can personally vouch for how fun it is and also that it certainly gets the heart pumping. I also think neighbors who can see this spot are very entertained watching people do it. So I think the recommendation would be to work with kids and draw some of this in your community. With things like this, even just chalk drawings, it really does make me personally feel more connected to my neighbors and brings a little bit of fun to my daily walks. On a similar note, these are another kind of fun take on a common activity, which are bike obstacle courses. Work with kids to decorate the course. This one features hot lava, pirates, cows, a black hole. You certainly want to avoid those. So this is just a really fun way to tie in bike skills, but also getting outside and enjoying yourself. One of the kind of Colorado specific guidelines, oh boy, okay. Sorry, I'm done. Okay. One of the main guidelines for Colorado is that if you're going to recreate outside, try to stick close to home. I know that the state has been really focusing on keeping folks out of the mountains, like small mountain communities, and encouraging people to find sort of the adventure and joy that's in their own backyard or in their county. I think this is a really cool way to advocate for those like local parks, public open spaces, those places that don't get as much love when those further destinations are an option. I think this also creates a great opportunity to highlight your neighborhood and like what is special about these like small joys like right around your block and the routes to get there. Oh, trying to advance the slide. Okay, there we go. And then, so one really cool like tool for this is from Ontario, which they put together these physical activity bingo cards with different activities. They also have a bingo card with different traffic signs that kids can identify, and also one with street infrastructure, which includes things like crosswalks, lighting, curb cuts. This seems like a great tool that can be adopted to your specific community and also get people out and moving and act as an advocacy tool to help people identify the aspects of their environment that are helpful or harmful to safe routes. I keep on accidentally advancing a little too far. Okay, and then finally, I think as people spend more time walking around their neighborhood, it's inevitable that they'll notice more aspects of the design that either encourage or discourage active transportation. You can provide a place to collect this information and even build it into a tool for identifying future work. You can encourage people to take photos of the new things they're noticing, whether they're good or opportunities ripe for improvement, as we could say. You can use simple tools like Google Maps to also map this information, or a story map. For example, this is a story map from Living Cully Walks in Portland, Oregon, that highlights transportation gaps as well as completed and scheduled active transportation projects. When you view it online, you can click along the street network to reveal more information. This could be an opportunity to get people's stories about how they spent their time outside during COVID-19 and what kind of joy it brought to their lives, or things that they noticed. This story mapping tool is available for free, and we think it's a great way to display information in a way that's a little bit more exciting and interactive. I hope that some of these examples kind of spark some ideas for you, and if you have any further questions, please let me know. I'm happy to share resources. And then with that, I'm happy to hand it back over to Corey.
Thanks so much, Natasha. Those were great and super helpful. I think we're all kind of looking for ways to spice up our outdoor activities. So we are going to move on to talking about staying active while indoors. So while it's great to, get out and get walking, and biking around, sometimes we can't for a variety of reasons. So I'm going to talk a bit about staying active while being indoors, and then transition more into getting ready for the next school year. So just a few different ideas that we found that people are doing. So scavenger hunts are super popular these days. There's the teddy bear hunt, obviously, and some others that we've kind of noticed popping up in different communities. There's also yoga, stretching exercises, cooking, dance parties. All of those can be great ways to encourage your students and families to do some physical activity while indoors. There are a lot of great online tutorials, a lot of things that are free and that can guide viewers through different activities. Another great idea is just reading and creative play. I think that's important to activate both your mind and your body. And one of the 6 E's of Safe Routes to School is also education. So even, reading books about walking and biking is a great way to kind of still think about safety while you have to stay indoors. We have a reading list that we can share with you all about different books that have to do with walking and biking. A lot of school districts are putting out reading lists as well that incorporate physical activity. So again, make sure that you check in with your individual schools or districts. There are some great resources that are out there about that. And then creative play is just great both for children and adults. Playing make-believe, getting up, moving around is another great way to keep the momentum going while you are inside. Another great idea that I thought was a lot of fun is decorating an old pair of sneakers. You can either do little cutouts or drawing or designs. Obviously, I don't want everyone a new pair of sneakers, but doing a little sneaker decorating activity could be fun. And then having a fashion show, either when school starts again or in your neighborhood when you go for your walk. That's another fun little creative idea. And we've also found a lot of good ideas just from different communities across the country. So in Marin County in California, their Safe Routes to School program is hosting an art and poetry contest where students are encouraged to create art and poetry about staying active. So they can, create a painting, drawing, write a story, and then submit it. And there's a little prize that comes with the winners. Obviously, it's important to remember that not all students have email and internet access. So consider adapting this concept to include social media posts or celebrate student art when campus activities resume, just to make sure that it is accessible to everyone. In Charlottesville, Virginia, their Safe Routes to School program is teaming up with their local arts community to create a citywide art gallery. So families can create artwork and then display it in their window or porch, and then they can add their work to a digital art map and then use that map to find the different artworks while they're doing walking and biking. So this is another really great idea and a nice partnership between the transportation community and the arts community. And this project in Charlottesville is called Art Apart. So another way to incorporate an indoor activity and an outdoor activity, both related to staying active. And this is another example out of California in Alameda County, where their Safe Routes to School program offers a whole list of activities for students to enjoy both indoors and outdoors. Activities include coloring sheets, safety videos, lesson plans, webinars, and there's a very cool climate conversation contest where students can share their experiences about climate change and how it relates to this time. The image here is one of the coloring sheets that are that's available for download. And again, this is a great way to do something that's like a calming, hopefully calming indoor activity that still relates to physical activity and safety. And again, we'll share all of this with you after the webinar. This was actually a Colorado example from Littleton. Some of the bears that were in the window for the bear hunts that are happening all around the world. So residents are encouraged to place bears or other fun creatures in their windows to add a little bit of fun to their daily walks. So if you have a bear or stuffed creature and are so inclined to put one in your window, you can contribute to the bear hunts that are happening across the country. And lastly, I mentioned scavenger hunts before, but you can also encourage families to create their own scavenger hunts, use a pre-made template like this one, or encourage students to make their own, or you can make one as a coordinator and share it with your families. There are lots of ways to do these activities, which is great. It's great that they're so adaptable. So those are a few ideas for ways to stay active while you're inside, while you're indoors during this time. We also wanted to talk for a quick minute just about things that you can do as a coordinator to keep your mind and body kind of active during this time and thinking about ways to prepare for the next school year. So you can also spend this time just learning more about your community. And this is something that both you can do and you can encourage your families to do. I think that, like this crisis has really highlighted a lot of inequalities in our country, from education to healthcare to food access and beyond. And so this is a great time to learn about the communities where we live and work, and learn about who's working and where they're working, so that we're better equipped to support our communities. And again, one of the six E's of Safe Routes to School is education. So we can spend this time educating ourselves about where we live, and also educating our students and families about traffic safety. And so as we're learning about our communities, while you're out on your, walks or rides, just a few things to kind of think about or keep in mind. Just notice what businesses are open, what is closed, who's working, who's not working, what kind of work are they doing, who else is walking and riding around, and what are things about your community that you haven't noticed, landmarks, buildings, street names, buildings, and do you know the story behind these places? So again, just kind of like, I guess, learning about your community, relearning about your community, discovering things that you didn't know before. Those are all great ways to kind of, build our knowledge and build our capacity to help other people. And lastly, working in partnership is really important right now. I think that a lot of times our work can feel isolating just under normal circumstances, so that isolation might feel even more intense now, especially if active transportation is not a main priority for students, families, and schools. So finding ways to work in partnership with others, other programs, whether it's a food program or a housing program, could be a great way to kind of keep your programs going and also support what's happening in your community. Maybe writing a joint newsletter or having a call just to brainstorm different ways to support each other could be a nice first step in kind of navigating the situation that we are in right now. And it's always just great to support our partners. And now we'll talk a bit about planning for when campus activities resume. So obviously none of us know when campus activities will resume or what things will look like in the fall. There could be lots of differences depending on different school districts. Some might open earlier than others. Some might have different, might open at different capacities. These are things we just don't know yet. So again, please make sure that you stay connected with, your state and local officials to get the most updated information on school reopenings. So just a few ideas to get started thinking about the new school year. You can spend some time researching the schools in your region to gather data about income level, food access, park locations, and then prioritize the schools where safe routes to school work is most needed. Using Google Maps to do a crosswalk and sidewalk gap inventory to see what infrastructure might need to be improved. Review school curriculum to see if walking and biking can be incorporated into lesson plans. We have plenty of past webinars if you want to get some ideas for your program. Thinking about starting a Safe Routes to School task force and researching some different departments and staff to be advocates on your Safe Routes to School task force team. Reviewing your school or district's wellness policy to see if they can be strengthened for walking and biking to school. And then finally, drafting some messages in advance of Walk to School Day in the fall. And again, we know, we're not sure what Walk to School Day will look like, but just thinking ahead, that can be, one thing that you're thinking about, maybe over the summer months. So in the short-term planning, we're going to start thinking about a few different groups who will kind of need to be prepared to re-enter, and resume campus activities. So we're thinking about preparing students, preparing family, parents and caregivers, and preparing teachers and school staff for returning back to school and safely traveling to school. So when thinking about students, with less cars on the road these days, people are using streets in lots of different ways. I know that here where I live in DC, I see a lot of people just like walking in the middle of the street now, and lots of kids like riding bikes in the middle of the street. So, it's great that people are out being active, but some of the safety norms that we're used to have kind of changed because there are less cars on the road. Although there's still a lot of speeding, so there are definitely still, major safety concerns that are happening. So, some students might need a traffic safety refresher when they get back to school. How do you cross the road safely? How do you ride safely? How do you put on your helmet? So thinking about getting back to school, this can be a great opportunity to just refresh students on, safety best practices. And I think that there are, a lot of students and families who might need that refresher course. Walk to School Day will be a great opportunity to do that. And also thinking about adapting current programs for small groups or physical distancing, if that's something that's incorporated into the new school year. So, is there a way to do a, walking school bus that incorporates physical distancing? These are all things that we're kind of brainstorming and thinking about. And then obviously just continuing to encourage safe walking and biking, whether on-campus activities resume or not, we're all trying to get out and be active in general. So those encouragement pieces are always welcome and always needed. And lastly, there might be a lot of students and families who are feeling a bit anxious or concerned about, getting back on a school bus or getting on public transit to travel to school. So we can think about drafting messaging around, safely using school buses and safely using public transit. And again, this is another chance to, kind of follow the lead of your state and local leaders and transit authorities if they have certain guidelines or messages, kind of piggybacking off of that, making sure that students and families have what they need, have the information that they need in order to stay safe while they're on school buses and using public transit. As far as preparing parents and caregivers, again, a lot of parents and caregivers will be, could be experiencing some anxiety or concerns about returning to school. So asking what kinds of resources they need, connecting with your local PTAs or parent caregiver groups if you have any. And again, connecting with the school district about, keeping buses safe and keeping, students safe while they're in transit. How are bus drivers being protected? How are students being protected? And then, developing some messaging and resources to share that with parents who might have some questions or concerns about putting their students on a school bus, which is totally understandable. And thinking about preparing teachers and school staff, again, staying updated on your school district's plans are really important. It's really important. If possible, I don't know if there are, district meetings that are happening or people are talking about like what the next school year will look like, what transportation will look like. If there are ways to be a part of that planning process, attending meetings or providing some feedback or input, that would be a great opportunity to connect with, teachers, administrators, school staff, and, school district officials, school board about what this transition will look like. Again, a lot of school districts have information on their websites. I would check there first and see learning opportunities to kind of incorporate some of the safe walking and biking strategies into plans for the fall or when campus activities resume. And of course, distance learning might still be a possibility for some students. We really aren't sure yet. but if distance learning is still a part of what is happening next school year, we can still encourage people to walk and bike and build in some of the physical activity breaks, maybe incorporating some of the strategies that Natasha talked about or I talked about, sharing some short videos with movement exercises students can do during their breaks. You can kind of frame this as like taking a mental and physical activity break to kind of, break up the staring at the computer screen all day. So, while we hope we're all able to safely gather, if we're not for some reason, I think that planning for distance learning, and having a few different ideas in mind for that is great while we're still figuring out what things will look like in the fall. So we'll continue to update our resources as we get more information about distance learning and kind of school campuses resuming. And as Michelle mentioned, we have our listserv. It's a great way to stay updated and connect with other practitioners across the country. There are so many great things that are happening and a lot of innovative ideas. So definitely sign up for the listserv to get the latest information and some really great ideas to inspire and energize you and your programs. And now I'm going to pass it back to Michelle. Hopefully we'll be able to get our audio fixed, and she will talk a bit more about some of our long-term planning that you can do.
All right, so hopefully you guys can hear me now. I switched phones. I'm going to talk a little bit about long-term planning, and you suggested a number of ways to get information and resources out the door to students and families right now, and plan for what can happen when campus activities resume. We know that's a lot already to do, and while I said at the beginning we didn't expect anyone to want to sit through a webinar on policy, there's really some opportunities right now to support safe routes to school through policy, sort of in the long-term stage. I feel like we're all in a state of reframing what public spaces look like, what school looks like, what it means to be able to be physically active in our communities, and it's a great opportunity to think about where safe routes to school is in the long term. We're going to do a full webinar on safe routes to school policy and what it looks like for school districts and municipalities later this year, but wanted to leave you with some parting policy-related thoughts that feel really relevant for today. So COVID-19 has brought really a greater awareness and sometimes enhanced the number of challenges that were already happening in many of our communities and touch safe routes to school. Things like how space in the street is allocated for people walking and biking versus cars, and the ability of for kids and adults to get adequate physical activity overall. So my number one recommendation is something that Corey mentioned before: keeping abreast of the policy and planning discussions in your city or town and school district to, number one, make sure policies that could be barriers to safe routes to school and kids walking and biking aren't unintentionally or intentionally put in place while we try to figure out how to address physical distancing needs and what school looks like when it reopens. And also to insert safe routes to school as a strategy as part of the solution for the future. It's become very apparent that it's really tough to be physically active when it's hard to go outside and use those same spaces that we normally do. So it's also made some cities see how space is allocated on the road. So things like doing temporary closures to cars or to increasing the width of sidewalks and bike lanes in order to accommodate physical distancing. We've seen a lot of these positive changes in a number of communities. So how can we put these policies, how can we put policies in place to make some of these things permanent? So really, they do become more permanent changes to support walking and biking. And remember that safe routes to school has benefits for student health and well-being, as well as environmental and cost savings, things that communities are going to be looking for going forward. So we hope that today's webinar has provided you with a lot of ideas. And while we're in the midst of a pandemic and hope that we'll never be in this situation again, hopefully these are things that we can put in place for positive changes in our communities going forward. And last but not least, remember to take care of yourself too. Safe routes to school practitioners are showing up for their schools, students, families, and communities. Remember to breathe and take a break once in a while. You really need to do it in order to continue to be effective. With that, I will turn it back over to Corey for some Q&A.
Thanks, Michelle. So again, if you have questions, you're welcome to put them in our chat box. We'll try to answer any that have come through. I know there's a question that came through via email about just wondering if now is a good time to to even encourage students and families to bike and walk to schools. And given that school is shut down, we're kind of in this situation right now. And I guess that what we found, is that we've still been encouraging people to get out walking and biking. And like Natasha was saying earlier, it really also depends on, like following the safety guidelines for your state and your community, and making sure that, that's the priority. We also understand that walking and biking and, advancing, active transportation might not necessarily be everyone's priority at the moment. I think that there are people who, are kind of, going through lots of different, who are in lots of different situations and lots of different priorities. Some people's priorities right now are just, making sure that there's food on the table for their families. So, while it's great to, encourage walking or biking, don't feel like you have to, push it. If you find that your community needs something else, kind of feel free to take the community's lead on that. I don't know if any other of our panelists had anything else to say about encouraging walking or biking during this time.
Yeah, I would echo that, follow the lead of what your community needs. But we don't want everybody to shift back into driving in their cars to and from school. So we definitely want to make sure that it's still sort of part of like our encouragement is still to be physically active, to be walking and biking, whenever you can.
Great. And someone else had asked a question about closing out grant requirements. Obviously with schools closed, it's kind of hard to, do certain activities we would have done if we were able to gather. So we can certainly follow up if people have individual questions about specific grants that they're that they're working on. Just based on what we've seen, I've kind of heard a range of different experiences of people saying some grant funders have been very flexible and understand the situation that everybody's in and are kind of adapting their expectations depending because they know that it's kind of hard to get things done. Some other situations, people are still kind of being sticklers and really want to make sure that all the requirements are finished. So this could be something that just kind of depends based on the grant that you're working on and who is funding it. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has experienced other things, but I've found that a lot of people have been willing to work with people who are grantees and being flexible given the situation. If you just kind of explain what's going on and what you've been able to accomplish, what you're not able to accomplish, they've been able to be a bit more accommodating. If anybody else has anything to share about grants,
yeah, absolutely. So as part of the Safe Routes to Parks program, we are actually kind of acting as a grant maker through the JPB Foundation. And I think from the perspective of somebody who is trying to be flexible with grant deliverables and funding, what's really helpful is when we actually hear the truth of where you guys are, what you're thinking, and what's feasible. I think having an open line of communication is so helpful here, because I think we're all just trying to help each other.
And this is Melissa from Colorado Safe Routes to School, and I don't know, specific to our grant, our Safe Routes to School grant in Colorado, as Michelle had said initially, if you have any questions or concerns or whatever, please reach out to me. We want to be as flexible as possible. And with that being said, if we do have grantees on the webinar today, a good place to start as well is if you're an infrastructure grantee, is start with your regional office. They will be the individuals that actually ultimately will decide or offer that flexibility, which I know they're all on board with. If you have a non-infrastructure grant, then specific to me, work with me, and we will figure out what you need to do. And fully understanding that there's a lot going on. So I think everybody just wants to offer that grace and work with people and see what you can do.
And a question just came in about is CDOT planning on launching a Safe Routes to School grant cycle in the fall?
Yes, that is still currently the plan. Our intent, we had moved to that 2-year cycle, and so our intention is to release that in August and have the grants due in November. That being said, we are trying to gather information from what other partners are doing throughout the country, regarding any grant cycles that they have coming up. And I did get 1 or 2 questions about, expanding the timeline. And so it's everything that we're considering. I guess I should say, we're open to hearing what people's concerns are. And so definitely send me an email or set up a time to talk, or give me a call, and we can talk about if there's specific ideas. But at the time of this right now, we still plan to move forward in the way that we have been talking about, which would be August.
Great. And Melissa, 2 more questions for you. Is there a match for the Safe Routes to School grant? I know budgets might be limited on matches. And also, how do people obtain the 25% response rates on parent surveys if school is out in order to apply in August?
Yeah, great question. So there is currently that requirement of that 20% match, and that has been the requirement for a very long time. So I anticipate that being the case moving forward. And then as far as the 25% participation for the parent survey, again, that is something specific that we're going to need to talk about and see what's feasible. And I think part of it is understanding what if our grant application is released in August and schools are back in session in some shape or form in the fall, then there is that opportunity to get the parent surveys completed at that point. However, no decisions have been made. We're waiting to meet with the advisory committee for the Safe Routes to School for Colorado, and these are all questions that I'll be bringing up to that committee and seeing if where we can offer flexibility, what we need to do for this year. And so again, if there's additional thoughts or concerns around that, please contact me and let me know so that I can share those with our advisory committee, and we can make decisions that hopefully are responsive and in lines with what the communities are experiencing.
Great. And is there a minimum or maximum ask amount?
So we have, so we're looking at a change in, well, currently the infrastructure, you can request up to $500,000. But we are looking at increasing that based on some feedback that we have had. And so that's specific to infrastructure. And then I'm trying to think, and I you know what, this will be good if this person maybe can just send me an email and we can talk specific about what your needs are, so that I can get the right information, based on what they're thinking about.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So lots of great questions. So Melissa, I feel like you'll be getting some emails from people about next steps, and people are planning and people are ready for it. So again, if you have specific questions that you want to ask Melissa about the grant process, please reach out to her and she can kind of walk you through the process and keep you all updated as things move forward. Any other last questions before we wrap up for today? Okay. So just a few closing reminders. So please make sure to sign up for the Colorado Safe Routes to School newsletter. You can email Wendy to get on that list. There are a lot of great updates and resources that are shared. So make sure that you are part of that. We just talked a bit about the upcoming grant cycle. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to Melissa, and her email address, I think that you all have it. It's also in these slides today. Our next upcoming webinar will be on May 13th at 11 a.m. and it'll be all about community engagement. We'll be talking about, both in-person community engagement and also community engagement while physical distancing, since I assume that we'll be incorporating both into our upcoming programs. So make sure that you sign up for that. The registration link should be going out shortly. And CDOT is also requesting some community engagement case studies. So they want to hear from you about different community engagement stories, successes, challenges. They're going to send out a request for case studies to their distribution list. So if you have a community engagement story, please feel free to respond to that request. And again, Melissa's contact is right here if you have additional questions or concerns. And also, please make sure if you haven't joined yet to join the Safe Routes to School, email discussion network. A lot of the resources that we talked about today came from that discussion board. So it's a great way to, share resources with other people, get new ideas, get fun tips and ask questions. So you're welcome to be a part of that. And you're also welcome to reach out to us if you have any other specific questions or areas of interest that you would like some support with. And here's our contact information if you need it, me, Michelle, and Natasha. And that is it for today. So unless you have other questions, we're gonna end a little bit early and give you some of your afternoon back. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Again, we are all learning about how to run safe routes school programs during COVID-19 with you. We'll definitely keep you updated as we get new information and have new ideas. Please be well. Thank you for joining us, and we will email out the recording of this webinar and our webinar slides shortly. Thank you.